First and foremost, thank you for viewing my video. I thought I'd record another video. It's been a couple of days, and first I want to shout out to the veterans that served in all veterans, even the ones that were discharged with their benefits taken away from them after they had sacrificed their lives. I want to shout out to them. I want to shout out to the primary caregivers that are there. That are not even expecting any gratitude from anybody. They're doing it because from the love of their heart. They're taking care of their elderly parents. They're taking care of their kids, and they're doing it, and they're sacrificing everything they have because of who they am, because of who they are. I just like to share with you that I volunteered for the Army back in 1970. At the time I was attending a college here, and I decided after about a year, I said, well, I needed to go in. It's a long story, but I volunteered for the draft in 1970. I went into the armed services. I was there until 1972. I spent my basic training at Fort Lewis, Washington. From there, I was had orders to go down to Fort Ord, California, which is Monterey, Malibu, Carmel, all of the area. And at that time, I had signed up to be a supply clerk. But after the process, I wind up going through several different trainings. One was for the leadership preparation course, which was for 2 weeks. I received a certificate for that I have. The other one was for it was called ASA, which is now they call it the Homeland Security Agency. Now, at that time, it was Army Security Agency, and it had to do with listening on our own conversation. But to make a long story short, I was able to, because I was a candidate, I was able to basically choose where I wanted to be served at. So I wind up in Frankfurt, Germany. And from there, instead of being a supply clerk, I wind up as an administrative battalion clerk. And administrative battalion clerk duties are to implement the United States Code of Conduct. And the Code of Conduct, the book looks like about the size of a Webster dictionary. And I'm going to try to make an analysis here. If you've been trained to be a lawyer, you don't go and try to do some surgical work, which you don't have the training for. I was put in a position to strip people's benefits from them. And I was very aware of this. You're having people coming from Vietnam, 2 tours. They're coming to Frankfurt, Germany to process out, which is 3 to 6 months. They come there as captains. Overnight, they're privates, because the United States government was stripping them, kicking them out of the armed services. This is what I was put in position to do, and I didn't like it. On-the-job training. I hated that job. Now, to cut through the chase, there's 3 things I learned while I was there. Number 1, the United States government is the biggest racist organization you could be part of. Number 2, don't put your trust in man, put your trust in God. And number 3, what man gives you, man can take away. What God gives you, no man can take away. And I want to thank the United States government for their training for me, on-the-job training. But I still like to shout out to those veterans. And I just recently read where it was like somewhere 40,000 veterans homeless. 13,000, 14,000 sleeping in no shelter, sleeping in cars, on the street. You know, for this to be one of the wealthiest countries in the world, we treat our We treat the veterans like the scum of the earth. I'm going to leave it at that. And I'm going to share another story with you. And the story is you have to go through something to be something. You know, in Pebble Beach got its name from pebbles. Because if you go down to the ocean there, these pebbles are being thrown up against the cliffs. The waves, the wind, the water, the elements, they're taking these pebbles and they're beating them up against the cliff. And once they've been there, it's a 24/7 process. Once they've been tossed and turned and backwards and forth up against the cliff, they're shaped into pearls. And these pearls, people coming from all over the world to collect them, making all kind of ornaments from them. Beautiful. That's why Pebble Beach got its name. Now, I'm going to use this story to share with you. On the other side of the cliff, the pebbles that didn't get tossed against the cliff, nobody wanted them. They were ugly, no shape, no form. So the story is saying you have to go through something to be something. That wind beat those elements up into something. And all of us are going through something. We just have to endure it. Endure it. And I want to say this to you, and I have stories that I could just share with you. And this is not about me. This is to uplift you. This is to heal you. And this is to comfort you while you're dealing with all these different things. You know, there was a story about the man. He was standing on the riverbank, and he seen his house floating down the river, and he was in distraught, melancholy. He says, "There goes my house floating down the river. I lost everything." And as he stood there, he looked on the other side. He says, "Looks like gold." So he says, "You know what?" He went on the other side of the river, on the bank side, and it was gold. His lost was his gain. I've been through hurricanes. I know what it is. I went to Hurricane Bueller. I was a sophomore, junior in high school. And let me tell you something. It's not a pretty sight. It's not a pretty sight. But at that time, just like I see in Houston, just like I see in Puerto Rico, just like I see all over this country, you still have people with heart. They're willing to help each other. But yet we have this climate that's trying to divide us. But if you for real, you're going to do what you need to do, the right thing. And I'm going to share this story with you before I come under over 15 minutes. And that was the story about the farmer in Africa. And what he did was he was farming this land. And he had been farming this land for 40 years. In the last 40 years, he decided he had been reading and hearing about men mining diamonds. So he says, you know what, if I don't come out ahead this year, I'm selling the property and I'm going mine diamonds where I've been reading about. So that year, that happened. He didn't harvest a cactus. So he sold the land, bought some provision, took off, and he was out. The third day he was out, he caught pneumonia and he died. The man he bought the property from, him and his foreman decided to go and survey the land. So they got on horseback and they went out, surveyed the land, and got to a little creek. And the foreman told the boss, why don't we water the horses here, since we've been riding 4 or 5 hours. So he said, that's a good idea. They rode up the creek. The foreman says to the boss, there's something flickering out in the water. He says, where? He says, you know what? Why don't we just ride out there in the creek? They rode out in the creek. They're still mining diamonds on that property today. De Beers Diamonds. It's a true story. And the story is saying the man was not a diamond miner inside, so how could it be a diamond? How could he see the diamonds on the outside? Now, over 6,000 years ago, a person showed up and he said, seek ye first the kingdom of God within you, and all these things will be given unto you. Everything that our heart desire is within us. We need to tap into it. It's called latent faculties. This is the greatest opportunity for anybody. Anybody. Age doesn't make a difference. They were 80, 85, and 86 years old when they went into the promised land and still had Velor, Joshua, and Caleb. Dust off that dream you had and get busy. Take 10 or 15 minutes of the day. Read. Reinvent yourself. This is the greatest time you can have. The greatest time. is now. And I want to close this and say, as I always say, and I want to reach out to the veterans. The single payer health plan is going to help you more. And those caregivers, primary caregivers, I know what you're dealing with. I cared for my parents for about 20-something years. My mom had Alzheimer's. My dad was partially paralyzed. And I'll say this to you and end it. The people that are going to hurt you the most are going to be family. But you can get through it. You can get through it because you got to go through something to be something. And I really appreciate you viewing my video. And I do and hope that this was uplifting, healing, and comforting to you. And I always like to close with the word shalom. Thank you. Bye.